Hello, and welcome to History at Bedtime. In the high passes of the Alps, where the air thins and the ground seems to fall away beneath every step, an army was moving through the snow. It was late in the year, later than sensible men would have chosen for such a crossing. The paths were narrow. Ice hid beneath loose stones. Horses slipped. Pack animals panicked at the smell of death below the ledges. Men who had survived battles in Spain and ambushes in Gaul now found themselves fighting a mountain that did not know their names and did not care which empire they served. Among them were Libyans and Iberians, Numidian horsemen, Balearic slingers, Gauls, Phoenicians, officers, guides, servants, drivers, and soldiers who had followed their commander farther than any of them had imagined when the march began. Somewhere in that long, broken column were elephants, immense and unfamiliar shapes breathing clouds into the cold air, each step testing ground that had never been meant to carry them. Behind the army lay Spain, the Pyrenees, the broad valley of the Rhone, and every road Rome had expected an enemy to use. Ahead lay Italy. The commander who had brought them there was not yet 30 years old. His name was Hannibal Barca. Rome knew war was coming. It had sent armies toward Spain and Sicily. It had fleets, allies, roads, colonies, and more men than Hannibal could hope to gather. What Rome did not expect was to look north and find its enemy descending from the mountains. That was Hannibal's first great victory in Italy, before any Roman army had been destroyed. He had made Rome look in the wrong direction. The crossing would become the most famous episode of his life. Later generations would remember the elephants, the snow, and the impossible road. But Hannibal had not crossed the Alps to become a legend. He had crossed them because he believed he had found the one way to break Rome. Not by attacking its walls first, not by defeating one army and waiting for surrender. He intended to enter Italy, destroy Roman armies in front of Rome's own allies, and prove that the Republic could no longer protect the people who supplied its strength. If enough allied cities abandoned Rome, the great reservoir of men on which Roman power depended would begin to empty. Rome might remain behind its walls, but the system around it would collapse. It was a bold plan, but not a foolish one. Many states had been broken by less than what Hannibal was about to do. He would defeat one Roman army after another. He would kill consuls, surround legions, frighten the Senate, and bring the words Hannibal at the gates into Roman memory. For years, he would seem to stand between Rome and the future it believed was inevitable. And yet, in the end, Rome would still be there. The mystery of Hannibal's life is not simply how he won so many battles. It is how a man could come so close to destroying Rome, do almost everything a battlefield commander could do, and still lose the war. To understand that, we have to leave the snow for a while. We have to go back to the sea. Carthage stood on the North African coast, near the site of modern Tunis. It faced the Mediterranean with walls, temples, markets, warehouses, workshops, harbors, and ships arriving from distant shores. It had been founded centuries earlier by Phoenician settlers from the eastern Mediterranean and had grown into the greatest commercial power of the Western Sea. Its merchants dealt in grain, silver, timber, wine, cloth, metals, pottery, dyes, luxury goods, animals, and human beings. Its sailors knew coasts and winds. Its influence reached across North Africa, Sardinia, parts of Sicily, southern Spain, and a network of ports that carried Carthaginian wealth across the sea. Carthage was not a dark and primitive shadow waiting beyond civilized Rome. It was older than Rome as a Mediterranean power, rich, literate, politically sophisticated, and deeply connected to the trading world of the Phoenicians. It had magistrates, councils, assemblies, noble families, farmers, sailors, artisans, priests, soldiers, and political rivalries as serious as those of any republic. But much of what survives about Carthage was written by people who defeated it. Roman and Greek authors preserve the story. Carthaginian libraries did not pass intact into later centuries. Its own voice was weakened first by defeat and then, long after Hannibal's death, by destruction. The Hannibal we know, therefore, stands partly in the words of enemies who feared him, hated him, admired him, and needed to explain how Rome had survived him. That makes certainty difficult. It also makes the shape of his reputation remarkable. Rome won the war, yet Rome could not make Hannibal small. His family was already famous before he was born. His father, Hannibal Barca, had fought Rome in the First Punic War, a struggle that lasted more than 2 decades and ended in Carthaginian defeat in 241 BCE. The war had begun over Sicily, but it had become a contest of endurance. Rome had not been a natural naval power. Carthage was. Yet Rome built fleets, lost them, built more, adapted its tactics, and kept returning. Storms destroyed ships. Battles consumed men. Money drained away. Still, Rome continued until Carthage could no longer match the effort. Carthage gave up Sicily and accepted a heavy indemnity. Hamilcar did not forget. The defeat was followed by an even more dangerous crisis. Carthage had employed large numbers of mercenary and allied soldiers. When payment was delayed and promises broke down, those men turned against the state they had served. The conflict became so brutal that later writers called it the Truceless War. Carthage nearly died from the consequences of losing to Rome. Hamilcar fought again, this time to save his own city from the army it could not pay. The lesson was severe. War required money. Loyalty could not be assumed. Defeat abroad could become collapse at home. A state that lost control of its soldiers, finances, and allies might not receive a second chance. Hannibal was born into the shadow of these events, probably in 247 BCE. He grew up in a household where Rome was not an abstract rival across the sea. Rome was the power that had defeated Carthage, taken Sicily, increased the indemnity, and then seized Sardinia while Carthage was weak. It was the enemy his father believed had humiliated the city and narrowed its future. The family name Barca is commonly connected with the idea of lightning or a thunderbolt. It suits the later legend, though Hamilcar's strategy was not simply sudden violence. He understood that Carthage needed a new base of wealth and manpower before it could challenge Rome again. He turned to Spain. The Iberian Peninsula offered silver mines, warriors, ports, fertile land, and space beyond immediate Roman control. Hamilcar crossed there with an army and began building what Carthage had lost elsewhere. He fought, negotiated, made alliances, punished resistance, and gathered resources. Spain became not merely a province, but the foundation of a possible Carthaginian recovery. According to an ancient story, the young Hannibal wanted to accompany his father. Hamilcar brought the boy before an altar and made him swear that he would never be a friend of Rome. We cannot know whether the scene happened exactly as later writers described it. Ancient history often preserves memory through dramatic moments shaped by retelling. But the oath survived because it expressed something true about Hannibal's life. Rome was the unfinished war he inherited from his father. Children inherit more than names and property. They inherit wounds, loyalties, fears, ambitions, and enemies they did not choose. Hannibal grew up among soldiers in Spain. He watched men march, bargain, raid, besiege, surrender, and betray. He saw that armies were not moved by courage alone. Men had to be fed, paid, rewarded, disciplined, and convinced that the commander knew where he was taking them. He also learned to lead people who were not one people. Carthaginian armies often included Libyans, Numidians, Iberians, Balearic Islanders, Gauls, Phoenicians, and others with different languages, weapons, customs, and reasons for fighting. Such an army could become a weakness under a poor commander. Orders might be misunderstood. Rival groups might distrust one another. Men fighting for pay might leave when pay failed. Hannibal learned instead to turn difference into strength. Light Numidian cavalry could harass, provoke, and disappear before heavier horsemen could catch them. Iberian and Gallic cavalry could strike with weight. Balearic slingers could injure men at distance. African infantry could provide disciplined stability. Iberian and Gallic foot soldiers could fight with speed and ferocity. Elephants could frighten horses and break order when the ground and timing favored them. The army did not need to become uniform. It needed to move toward one purpose. Hamilcar died in Spain around 229 or 228 BCE. Ancient accounts differ on the precise circumstances, but he appears to have died during military operations, leaving the work unfinished. Command passed to Hasdrubal the Fair, Hannibal's brother-in-law. Hasdrubal expanded Carthaginian power through diplomacy as well as war. He founded or developed New Carthage, modern Cartagena, on the southeastern coast of Spain. Its harbor, fortifications, nearby mines, and location made it the heart of Carthaginian power in Iberia. Hasdrubal also made an agreement with Rome that placed a boundary at the Ebro River. The arrangement did not settle every question, but it temporarily limited how far Carthaginian power might expand northward without provoking Roman opposition. Then, in 221 BCE, Hasdrubal was assassinated. The army acclaimed Hannibal as commander, and Carthage confirmed the choice. He was about 26 years old. Ancient writers describe him as physically tough, able to endure heat, cold, hunger, and lack of sleep. He ate what soldiers ate and could sleep wrapped in a cloak among the guards. Some of these details belong to the familiar image of the ideal commander, but they mattered in an army that judged leaders every day. Hannibal did not command merely because Carthage had given him a title. His authority had to be renewed through performance. He had to win, share danger, distribute reward, understand different troops, and make men believe that following him was safer than abandoning him. He moved quickly to strengthen Carthaginian control in Spain. He campaigned against tribes that resisted, gained wealth, tested his army, and built the confidence of soldiers who had chosen him. Then he turned toward Saguntum. Saguntum was a wealthy city south of the Ebro River with a relationship to Rome. Its exact legal position remains debated. It lay south of the boundary agreed with Hasdrubal, yet Rome treated it as a friend whose destruction it could not ignore. For Hannibal, the city presented both a threat and an opportunity. If Rome could extend protection deep into the Carthaginian sphere in Spain, then the recovery built by his father might slowly be surrounded. If Hannibal attacked, Rome might answer with war. He attacked. The siege began in 219 BCE and lasted for months. Saguntum stood on strong ground and resisted fiercely. Hannibal himself was wounded during the fighting. The siege required persistence, engineering, assaults, and the slow exhaustion of a city that knew surrender might bring little mercy. Saguntum did not fall quickly enough to make the decision look easy. The city stood on rising ground behind strong defenses. Its people understood that the siege was larger than a dispute with one neighboring power. Rome had accepted their friendship. Hannibal's attack was testing whether that friendship had weight. Inside the walls, defenders repaired damage, watched siege towers approach, and waited for help from across the sea. Outside, Hannibal's army built works, moved engines, filled ditches, attacked gates, and tried to turn a defended height into a place that could be entered. A siege demanded a different patience from the sudden maneuvers for which Hannibal would later become famous. Walls did not become frightened by cavalry. Stone had to be broken. Defenders had to be exhausted. Every assault exposed men to missiles from above. During one attack, Hannibal was struck in the thigh by a projectile. The wound forced a pause and reminded the army that the young commander was not protected by reputation. He had taken control only a short time before. If he died beneath Saguntum's walls, the great plan against Rome would end before it began. He recovered and returned. The siege continued through changing weather and diminishing supplies. Roman envoys protested, but no Roman army arrived in time to lift the pressure. For the people inside Saguntum, every distant sail might have seemed like rescue until it passed. Hannibal could not withdraw without damaging the authority on which his command depended. He had chosen Saguntum as the place where Roman influence would be challenged. Failure would tell Spanish allies and enemies that Rome's friendship could stop him. The city could not surrender easily either. Once months of resistance had cost lives and destroyed homes, trust in mercy narrowed. Ancient accounts describe desperate internal decisions, property gathered and burned, and citizens choosing death rather than capture. Roman writers shaped the fall into a story of loyalty and sacrifice, so every dramatic detail deserves caution. The desperation itself is not difficult to believe. Sieges compress war into a closed space. Food becomes policy. Water becomes courage. A damaged section of wall becomes the most important ground in the world. People who never chose to be soldiers carry stones, tend wounds, watch children grow thin, and listen at night for the sound of digging beneath foundations. Outside, the besieging army also pays. Men die in assaults that gain only a few steps. Disease spreads in camps. Officers argue over where the next attack should fall. Supplies must be brought from a countryside that begins to resent the burden. For Hannibal, Saguntum was the first proof that his boldness included endurance. He did not simply strike and move. He remained until resistance was broken. When Roman diplomacy finally reached Carthage, the argument had become almost impossible to contain. Roman envoys demanded that the city decide whether Saguntum's destruction and Hannibal's command would be defended. Carthaginian leaders answered by returning to the disputed agreements, asking whether Saguntum truly lay under Roman protection and whether Rome itself had respected earlier settlements. Each side spoke the language of law. Both prepared for force. Later tradition describes a Roman envoy gathering the fold of his toga and declaring that he carried peace and war, asking the Carthaginians to choose. They answered that he should give whichever he wished. He released the fold and declared war. The scene may have been arranged by memory into perfect theater. It captures the moment because neither side now wanted a compromise that looked like retreat. Behind the formal words stood the ruins of Saguntum. Ahead stood the Alps. When Saguntum finally fell, Rome sent envoys to Carthage and demanded that Hannibal be surrendered. The Carthaginian leadership refused. War followed. It is easy to imagine the Second Punic War beginning at that moment, as if peace had existed until one city fell. In reality, the war had been approaching for years. Rome feared the growth of Barcid power in Spain. Carthage remembered its losses and Roman opportunism. Hannibal believed delay would only make Rome stronger. The fall of Saguntum did not create all these tensions. It released them. Rome prepared to strike in Spain and Africa. That was the sensible plan. Its fleets could move troops by sea. Its armies could threaten Carthaginian territory. If the war remained where Rome expected, Roman strength would have time to gather. Hannibal needed the war to begin somewhere else. His real target was not a city on the Spanish coast. It was the faith of Rome's allies in Italy. Rome did not rule the peninsula through Roman citizens alone. It had built a web of colonies, treaties, obligations, and allied communities that supplied soldiers and resources. Some allies had been defeated by Rome. Some benefited from Roman order. Some obeyed because rebellion seemed hopeless. Their loyalty was not identical, but together they gave Rome the ability to lose an army and raise another. Hannibal saw the hidden weakness inside that strength. If he could enter Italy and defeat Roman armies before the eyes of those allies, he might prove that Rome was no longer permanent. He could release captured allies while holding Roman citizens, present himself as a liberator, and offer a new political future. He did not need every city to love Carthage. He needed enough cities to doubt Rome. The direct sea route was too dangerous under Roman naval power. So Hannibal chose the road no Roman plan had treated as the main danger. He would march from Spain, cross the Pyrenees, move through Gaul, cross the Rhone, pass over the Alps, and enter Italy from the north. The distance was enormous. The peoples along the route were not under Carthaginian control. Rivers could delay the army. Mountain tribes could attack from above. Winter might close the passes. Men and animals would consume supplies every day. The elephants alone required careful management, food, water, handlers, and routes broad enough to carry their weight. The plan demanded speed, negotiation, deception, force, and luck. It also demanded that thousands of men believe the commander knew where the road ended. Before the march began, New Carthage became a place of preparation and farewell. Silver from the mines moved through accounts and storehouses. Weapons were checked. Grain was measured. Horses were gathered. Officers decided which troops would remain in Spain and which would follow the road north. Hostages and alliances had to be secured because an army leaving for Italy could not turn back each time rebellion threatened behind it. For the soldiers, the plan may not have been visible in its full scale at first. Orders move through ranks and pieces. A man learns that his unit marches tomorrow, that rations are issued for several days, that baggage must be reduced, that winter clothing should be found if possible. Only gradually does the destination become real. Italy was not a neighboring valley. It lay beyond peoples who owed Carthage nothing and mountains many men had never seen. Some soldiers left families in Spain or North Africa. Some expected a campaign of one season and would not return for 16 years. Others would never return at all. Ancient histories preserve commanders and battles, but every great departure also contains small private endings. A hand held at a gate, a debt left unsettled, a child too young to remember the face of the man walking away. Hannibal also had ties in Spain beyond command. Later sources connect him with an Iberian wife, often called Emils, though much about her life is uncertain. Whether she remained in Spain or traveled elsewhere, the tradition reminds us that the Barcid presence was built not only through conquest, but through relationships with local elites. When the column finally moved from New Carthage, it carried more than an army. It carried the wealth of Spain, the unfinished ambition of Hamilcar, the political risk accepted by Carthage, and thousands of separate hopes that Hannibal's impossible road would lead somewhere worth the cost. In 218 BCE, Hannibal left New Carthage. He left his brother Hasdrubal to defend the Spanish base and began moving north with a great army. Ancient numbers differ, and every large number from antiquity should be treated with caution, but there were tens of thousands of infantry, thousands of cavalry, and 37 elephants. The column stretched across the land. Soldiers, horses, baggage animals, weapons, grain, tools, servants, guides, officers, and animals unlike anything many of the people watching from distant hills had ever seen. They were not yet marching toward a battle. They were marching toward the possibility of reaching one. Every mile consumed strength. Every delay helped Rome. And somewhere ahead, beyond rivers, hostile tribes, and mountains already touched by snow, lay the country Hannibal intended to tear away from Roman power. The first resistance came before the Alps. Hannibal crossed the Ebro and moved toward the Pyrenees, but not every community along the route welcomed a foreign army. Some fought, some negotiated, some watched to see whether the invader would pass quickly or remain. Hannibal left troops behind to secure territory and dismissed others whose loyalty seemed uncertain or whose presence would make the crossing more difficult. By the time he entered Gaul, the army was already smaller than the one that had left New Carthage. That was not necessarily failure. A commander moving across unfamiliar land could not measure strength only by numbers. Unreliable men could spread fear, desert at the worst moment, or consume food needed by those more likely to continue. Hannibal needed an army that would not dissolve when the road became frightening. Southern Gaul was not a single political world. Different tribes had different rivalries, interests, and memories. Some might trade, some might guide, some might attack the baggage and vanish. Some feared Rome, others feared their neighbors more. Hannibal had to move through this changing landscape without allowing every local dispute to become his war. He used gifts, promises, threats, hostages, speed, and force. The army followed the valleys where it could. Scouts moved ahead. Local guides were questioned. Officers had to judge whether a reported road was truly open or whether it led into an ambush. The men marched through dust and heat, still far from the snow that would later define the journey. Meanwhile, Rome had sent the consul Publius Cornelius Scipio toward Spain. The Roman plan was already in motion when news arrived that Hannibal had crossed the Pyrenees and was moving faster than expected. Scipio sailed to Massalia, modern Marseille, near the mouth of the Rhone. He hoped to find Hannibal still on the western side of the river, perhaps delayed while trying to move men, horses, baggage, and elephants across. A great river can stop an army more effectively than walls. Boats must be found or built. Rafts must be tied. Men waiting on the shore become vulnerable. Horses fear unstable surfaces. Baggage piles up. An enemy arriving at the right moment can attack a column divided by water. Hannibal knew this. He also knew that a Gallic force waited on the far bank to oppose him. Rather than attempt a simple frontal crossing, he sent a detachment upriver under Hanno. The men moved away from the main camp, crossed where the river was easier, and circled behind the Gauls. When smoke rose as a signal, Hannibal's main force began crossing. The Gauls prepared to resist from the bank. Then Hanno's men appeared behind them. The defenders found themselves threatened from two directions and broke. The river that might have trapped Hannibal became another obstacle he had turned against those who expected it to protect them. Moving the elephants was more difficult. Ancient sources describe rafts covered with earth so that the animals might step onto them as if onto solid ground. The details may have been shaped in retelling, but the challenge was real. Elephants were powerful, intelligent, and dangerous when frightened. Handlers had to control animals whose weight could overturn a poorly built platform and whose panic could spread through men and horses. Hannibal completed the crossing. Scipio's scouts arrived too late. The Roman consul understood what the speed of Hannibal's movement meant. The Carthaginian was no longer following the war Rome had prepared. Scipio sent his brother Aeneas on toward Spain with much of the army and returned to Italy to meet the threat approaching from the north. This decision mattered. Rome would not abandon Spain simply because Hannibal had escaped. The war would begin to divide into several theaters, and the foundation Hannibal had left behind would eventually become as important as the victories he won ahead. For the moment, however, he still held the initiative. From the Rhone, the army moved inland toward the Alps. The lower valleys offered food, guides, and temporary friendship, but every alliance was uncertain. Mountain peoples understood how vulnerable a marching army became on narrow paths. They did not need to defeat Hannibal in open battle. They could roll stones from above, strike the baggage, frighten animals, and disappear before the main force could deploy. At one point, local leaders came offering friendship, hostages, supplies, and guides. The gestures looked reassuring. Hannibal did not fully trust them. His suspicion was justified. The guides led the army into difficult ground where warriors attacked from the heights. The column was stretched along a narrow road. Horses and pack animals panicked. Men were struck from above. Some fell into ravines. The attackers aimed not only at soldiers, but at the baggage on which survival depended. Hannibal had prepared for betrayal. He had placed stronger troops where they could respond and eventually drove the attackers away. But victory in such terrain did not restore the animals, supplies, and men already lost. The Alps charged a price for every lesson. Higher ground brought colder nights. The road narrowed. Snow covered older snow in places, hiding the edge between firm ground and emptiness. Men who had grown up under African or Iberian sun climbed into a world where breath hurt and sleep offered little recovery. The army could not simply turn around. Behind it lay hostile peoples, rivers, and the long road back to Spain. Ahead lay Italy and the promise that all this suffering would become meaningful if they could reach the plain. Leadership in such a march was not the same as command on a battlefield. Hannibal could not arrange the mountain into a formation. He could not surround the cold. He had to keep men moving when they no longer believed the next bend would be better than the last. Ancient writers describe him appearing where the danger was greatest, restoring order, encouraging the exhausted, and showing that he endured the same weather. These scenes may have gained drama in the telling, but an army in the Alps could not survive on distant orders. The commander had to remain visible enough that men understood the purpose had not vanished. One episode became especially famous. After a landslide or broken section of path blocked the descent, men had to clear and rebuild the road. Ancient accounts speak of rock heated by fire and treated with sour wine, a detail debated ever since. Whether or not the method was exactly as described, the army did spend precious time cutting and repairing a route broad enough for animals and baggage. Delay meant hunger. Hunger meant desertion, sickness, and the slow collapse of discipline. The men worked because the alternative was to remain trapped above Italy. At or near the summit, Hannibal is said to have shown them the land below. The exact location of the pass is still debated, and the speech later writers placed in his mouth cannot be treated as a transcript. Yet the scene captures what the army needed. There, beyond the descent, were fields, towns, food, allies among the Gauls, and the country of the enemy. Rome was not visible in the distance, but the road toward Rome had become imaginable. The mountain could be crossed because the men could finally believe there was another side. The descent was in some ways worse than the ascent. Snow had holes in ice. Animals leaned against slopes and pulled men with them when they fell. The path could collapse under weight. Exhausted soldiers, seeing the plain below, had to resist the temptation to hurry. When the survivors finally reached the Pa Valley, they were not the army that had left Spain. Ancient figures vary greatly, but all agree that the losses were severe. Men had died in fighting, rivers, falls, cold, sickness, and desertion. Horses and pack animals had suffered even more. The elephants had survived the crossing, though most would not survive long in Italy. Hannibal had reached the country he intended to invade with an army diminished almost to the edge of ruin. And yet arrival itself changed everything. Rome had failed to stop him in Spain, Gaul, at the Rhone, or in the mountains. The Gauls of northern Italy, many of whom hated recent Roman expansion, saw a commander who had appeared from behind the Alps with elephants and veterans. But admiration would not feed his army. Hannibal needed victory quickly. The Gauls might join a winner. They would not risk everything for a foreign commander who looked exhausted and doomed. His own soldiers also needed proof that the mountains had led somewhere other than death. The first encounter came near the Ticinus River. Publius Cornelius Scipio had returned to Italy and moved north. The clash was largely a cavalry action, smaller than the great battles to come, but it revealed the danger Hannibal's horsemen posed. The Numidians moved with speed and flexibility. They could approach, throw javelins, wheel away, and return. Their apparent retreat could become another attack. Heavier Iberian and Gallic cavalry added force when the moment came to close. The Roman cavalry was defeated. Scipio was wounded and narrowly escaped. Later tradition credited his young son with helping save him. that son would one day become Scipio Africanus, the Roman who finally met Hannibal at Zama. For now, he was a youth watching the man who had entered Italy begin to dismantle Roman confidence. Ticinus was not a great slaughter. Its effect lay in what it promised. The Carthaginian army was still dangerous. The Gauls began to join. Rome's northern position became uncertain. Hannibal's cavalry had shown that it could control movement and pursuit. Then another Roman consul arrived. Tiberius Sempronius Longus had been preparing to operate from Sicily against Africa. Rome recalled him when Hannibal entered Italy. He marched north eager to engage before the other consul recovered or the Carthaginian gained more Gallic support. Hannibal studied him. The difference between the two commanders was not courage. Sempronius was energetic and believed Roman strength should be used before the situation worsened. Hannibal understood that urgency could be provoked. It was December 218 BCE. The army stood near the Trebia River. The weather was cold. The water was colder. Hannibal prepared the ground before dawn. He selected a hidden position among reeds and broken land and placed a detachment there under his brother Mago. The men waited out of sight while the rest of the army ate, warmed themselves, and prepared. Then the Numidian cavalry rode toward the Roman camp. They attacked, shouted, threw weapons, and withdrew. Sempronius took the bait. The Romans rushed out before many had eaten. They pursued the Numidians and crossed the Trebia through water that rose high against their bodies. The cold numbed limbs. Armor and clothing became heavy. By the time they reached the far side, the Roman soldiers had already spent strength simply arriving at the battlefield. Hannibal's men were waiting dry and fed. The battle began with skirmishers and elephants disturbing the Roman flanks. Carthaginian cavalry drove back Roman horsemen. The Roman infantry in the center fought hard and pushed forward, but the collapse of the flanks left it increasingly exposed. Then Mago's hidden force emerged behind them. The Romans found pressure in front, cavalry at the sides, and an enemy appearing from the rear. Many were driven back toward the freezing river. Others were cut down. A strong body of Roman infantry fought through the Carthaginian center and escaped, but the army as a whole suffered a severe defeat. Hannibal had not won simply because his soldiers were braver. He had arranged hunger, cold, impatience, terrain, concealment, and timing before the main lines met. The Roman consul had decided to fight. Hannibal had decided what kind of fight it would be. The victory transformed his position. More Gauls joined him. Supplies became easier to obtain. The army that had descended from the Alps close to exhaustion now looked like the force around which resistance to Rome might gather. Winter did not end the danger. Most of the elephants died during the months that followed. Hannibal's troops suffered from weather and sickness. Yet the commander remained in northern Italy, gathering strength and waiting for the next road south to open. When the campaigning season returned in 217 BCE, Rome placed new consular armies in his path. One watched routes on the eastern side of the Apennines. The other, under Gaius Flaminius, guarded the western approach. Hannibal crossed the mountains by a route the Romans did not expect, and then led his army through the marshes of the Arno. The passage was miserable. For days, men moved through water and mud. There was little dry ground for sleep. Animals sank. Supplies spoiled. Hannibal himself became ill and lost the sight of one eye. The image of the one-eyed general would later become part of his legend, but at the time it was a reminder that the commander who seemed to bend armies to his will could still be wounded by water, infection, exhaustion, and the ordinary cruelty of a campaign. He emerged into Etruria ahead of Flaminius. Then he began to burn and ravage the land. The destruction had a purpose beyond gathering supplies. Hannibal wanted Flaminius to follow. The Roman consul could see fields burning in territory he was expected to protect. Political pressure, personal pride, and military duty all pointed toward pursuit. Hannibal moved toward Lake Trasimene. There, between the water and the hills, he found the ground he wanted. A road entered a basin bordered by the lake on one side and rising land on the other. Hannibal placed troops in concealment along the heights and positioned forces to block the way ahead. The trap depended on patience. The Romans had to enter deeply enough that turning back would become impossible. Morning came with mist over the low ground. Flaminius advanced without waiting for full reconnaissance. The front of the Roman column entered the basin. More men followed. The line stretched along the road, unable to see clearly where the enemy waited. Then Hannibal gave the signal. The hills seemed to release an army. Carthaginian and allied troops descended from the heights. Others struck the Roman front. Still more closed the road behind. The Romans had little room to form their normal battle line. Some fought in isolated groups. Some were driven toward the water. Some entered the lake and drowned under the weight of armor or were killed while trying to escape. Flaminius died. Thousands died with him. Thousands more were captured. Lake Trasimene was not only a defeat, it was the disappearance of a consular army inside a landscape Hannibal had chosen. News reached Rome with the force of nightmare. Another force sent to reinforce Flaminius was also defeated by Hannibal's cavalry. Within a short time, Rome had lost men, commanders, and the illusion that courage alone would find an answer. The Republic appointed Quintus Fabius Maximus as dictator. Fabius understood that Hannibal needed great battles more than Rome did. The invader was far from Carthage. His army could not be replaced as easily as a Roman levy. His political strategy depended on spectacular proof that Rome was helpless. If Roman commanders refused to provide that proof, followed him at a distance, cut off foragers, protected important towns, and waited, time might begin to fight on Rome's side. This strategy required a kind of courage Roman society did not always admire. Fabius had to watch farms burn and refuse battle. He had to endure accusations of cowardice. Soldiers wanted revenge. Allies wanted visible protection. Politicians wanted action. Hannibal wanted anger to pull the Roman army into another trap. Fabius would not go. He shadowed the Carthaginian, occupied high ground, blocked routes when he could, and refused the decisive encounter. Hannibal tried to provoke him. He devastated land, threatened allied communities, and once spared the estates of Fabius while damaging those around them, perhaps hoping to create suspicion that the dictator had a private arrangement with the enemy. The attempt revealed how Hannibal fought. He did not attack only armies. He attacked confidence between commanders, citizens, and allies. For a time, Fabius contained him, but delay was politically painful. Rome had not built its reputation by following an enemy while he burned Italy. When the dictator's term ended, the demand for a decisive answer returned. Fabius's caution did not mean that Hannibal controlled every movement. One of the most revealing contests between them unfolded in Campania, where the land was fertile and the roads could become traps of their own. Hannibal had entered the rich Falernian plain, gathering food and destroying property, while Fabius watched from the heights. The Roman dictator then occupied the exits. For once, the Carthaginians seemed enclosed. Mountains and Roman positions blocked the roads. If Fabius continued to wait, hunger might accomplish what battle had not. Roman officers believed Hannibal had finally made a mistake. Hannibal needed a road through an army that refused to come down and fight. He chose darkness. According to the ancient account, he ordered bundles of dry wood tied to the horns of cattle. During the night, the wood was set alight and the animals were driven toward the heights near one of the guarded passes. From a distance, the moving flames looked like torches carried by troops. The Roman detachment watching the pass believed Hannibal was attempting to escape across the high ground. It left its position and moved toward the lights. The cattle ran in confusion, flames rising above their heads. Some climbed, some scattered. The night, filled with movement no observer could interpret clearly. While Roman attention followed the false column, Hannibal led the main army through the weakened pass. By morning, he was free. The escape did not destroy Fabius's strategy. It did something more personal. It showed that even the commander who refused battle could still be attacked through expectation. Fabius had tried to close every road. Hannibal created a road inside the Roman imagination. The story spread because it was easy to see in the mind. Dark hills, frightened cattle, fire moving where soldiers should have been, Roman guards rushing toward a threat that did not exist. For Hannibal's army, it was another proof that their commander could find a way out when the land seemed closed. For Rome, it deepened frustration. Fabius had preserved the army but allowed the enemy to ravage territory and escape. His strategy made sense over months. Roman politics judged what citizens could see that week. At one point, authority was divided between Fabius and his master of cavalry, Marcus Minucius Rufus, who favored a more aggressive approach. Minucius won a limited success and received equal command, a decision that reflected the impatience surrounding Fabius. Hannibal soon offered Minucius the kind of opportunity Roman ambition found difficult to refuse. He concealed troops in broken ground and drew Minucius into an attack. The Romans advanced and began to fall into danger as hidden forces appeared. Fabius, watching nearby, brought his army to the rescue. Minucius survived because the man he had challenged came down from the heights. Later tradition says Minucius acknowledged Fabius as a father and surrendered the equal authority he had been given. The scene may have been polished into a moral lesson, but it expressed the argument Rome was having with itself. Was courage the willingness to attack, or the discipline to wait? Hannibal had made that question painful. Roman ideas of honor pushed commanders toward decision, yet his greatest victories had grown from their eagerness. To defeat him, Rome would have to change what it meant by bravery. Fabius offered the answer of patience. Rome was not yet ready to accept it completely. The Republic prepared an army larger than any it had yet sent against Hannibal. The consuls for 216 BCE were Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Their forces gathered near Cannae in Apulia, where Hannibal had seized an important grain depot. Rome believed mass would solve the problem. Tens of thousands of infantry could press through the center of Hannibal's smaller army. There would be no mist, no freezing river, no narrow lakeside road. The ground was open. Roman courage and weight could finally operate without deception. Hannibal looked across the plain and saw not safety for Rome, but the largest opportunity of his life. The morning of Cannae began under a southern Italian sky. Dust lay on the plain. The Aufidus River ran nearby. The Roman army had the greater number of infantry, perhaps far greater, though ancient totals vary. Hannibal had fewer men in the main line, but he held an important advantage in cavalry and, more importantly, in the freedom to shape the battle around what he knew the Romans wanted. The two consuls shared command, changing authority from day to day according to Roman practice. Later writers placed much blame on Varro and praised Paulus as the cautious man carried into disaster. But memory often searches for one person to hold responsible when a whole society has demanded action. Rome had not raised such an army in order to wait. The legions and allied infantry formed in unusual depth. The idea was simple and powerful. Concentrate mass in the center, drive forward, break Hannibal's line, and finish the war in one overwhelming collision. Hannibal placed his Iberian and Gallic infantry in a curved center that projected toward the Romans. On either side, but set slightly back, stood his veteran African infantry. Heavy cavalry under Hasdrubal took position on one wing. Numidian horsemen waited on the other. The shape looked vulnerable. That was part of its purpose. Before the battle, Hannibal is said to have joked with one of his officers that among the vast number of Romans there was not one man with the same name as the officer. The story may be literary, but it preserves the calm later generations imagined in him. He wanted his men to look at the enormous Roman formation and see not an unstoppable mass, but an army already moving toward the place he had prepared for it. The cavalry battle began violently. On the Roman right, near the river, heavy cavalry met at close range. There was little room for elegant maneuver. Men fought almost like infantry from horseback, then dismounted or fell into a brutal struggle. Hannibal's Iberian and Gallic cavalry prevailed and drove the Roman horsemen from the field. On the opposite wing, the Numidians held the allied cavalry in constant motion. They attacked, withdrew, returned, and prevented the Romans from giving support elsewhere. Then the infantry lines met. The Roman center pushed forward. Hannibal's projecting line began to yield. To Roman eyes, the plan seemed to be working. The Gauls and Iberians were being driven back. The deep mass of legionaries and allies pressed toward apparent victory. Men behind pushed those ahead. Units moved inward toward the collapsing center, seeking the breakthrough that would end years of humiliation. But Hannibal's center did not break. It bent. The curve that had bulged toward Rome slowly flattened. Then it became a hollow. The Roman infantry advanced farther into it, packed ever more tightly as men from the sides moved toward the place where the enemy seemed weakest. The African infantry on Hannibal's flanks had not been driven away. They remained positioned on the shoulders of the Roman advance. At the right moment, they turned inward. The Romans now faced enemies not only in front, but along both sides. Still, the trap was not complete. Hannibal's heavy cavalry, having defeated the Roman horsemen near the river, did not disappear into a long pursuit. It crossed behind the Roman army and struck the allied cavalry fighting the Numidians. The Roman cavalry on that wing also broke. The Numidians followed the fugitives. The heavy cavalry turned again. It returned to the battlefield behind the Roman infantry. The circle closed. At first, men near the center may not have understood. They heard pressure, shouting, metal, and the sounds of battle from every direction. Those on the outer edge saw African infantry advancing from the sides. Those in the rear saw cavalry arriving where no friendly cavalry remained to stop it. The Roman army had become a crowd trapped inside its own depth. Men were pressed so closely that some could not raise shields or swing weapons. Units lost shape. The living stood upon the fallen. Heat, dust, fear, and the weight of bodies turned the formation that had been designed to crush Hannibal into a prison. The killing continued for hours. Ancient estimates of the dead differ, but the scale was immense. Tens of thousands of Romans and allies died. The consul Paulus was among them. So were former consuls, senior officers, senators, and men from families whose names shaped the Republic. A smaller group cut its way out. Others escaped across the river or reached nearby towns. Thousands were captured. By evening, Hannibal stood over one of the greatest battlefield victories in history. He had used Roman confidence as part of the weapon. The enemy's strength had entered the trap willingly because every step forward looked like success. Later commanders would study Cannae as the perfect double envelopment. Lines drawn on maps make it appear almost clean. The center bends, the flanks turn, cavalry closes the rear. The ground was not clean. It was filled with men who had died unable to move, with broken equipment, wounded animals, dust turned dark, and survivors calling for water among bodies that stretched farther than the eye could easily separate. Military genius had produced a shape. Human beings had died inside it. That night, the question was no longer whether Hannibal could defeat Rome in battle. He had answered that beyond doubt. The question was what Rome would do now. Hannibal's cavalry commander Maharbal is said to have urged an immediate march on the city. According to the famous story, He promised that within days Hannibal could dine on the capital, then complained that Hannibal knew how to win a victory, but not how to use one. The line is too perfect to accept without caution, but it survived because it gives simple form to a question asked ever since. Why did Hannibal not march directly on Rome after Cannae? The answer begins with the army around him. It had just fought an exhausting battle. It had suffered losses. Rome was not an open camp, but a fortified city with walls, defenders, supplies, and a population that could be mobilized. Hannibal had no great siege train ready to break those walls. A failed assault would have transformed the greatest victory of his life into proof that he could destroy armies but not touch the city itself. More importantly, his strategy had never depended on storming Rome first. Cannae was supposed to break the alliance system. Hannibal released many Italian prisoners without ransom and sent them home with a message. His war was against Rome, not against the peoples Rome had forced into service. He held Roman citizens and offered the peninsula a choice. The choice now seemed real. Capua, one of the richest and most important cities in Italy, defected. Other communities in the south changed sides or began secret negotiations. Some Greek cities looked toward Carthage. Philip V of Macedon opened diplomatic contact. Syracuse would later join the Carthaginian side. For a moment, the future seemed to move in Hannibal's direction. He had entered Italy to prove Rome could not protect its allies. At Cannae, he had proved it in a single terrible day. Then he waited for Rome to behave like a defeated state. No request for peace came. The Senate did not send envoys to discuss surrender. It did not treat Cannae as the end of the war. Instead, Rome closed its gates, controlled panic, gathered survivors, appointed new commanders, and began raising more armies. The Republic refused to ransom many of the captured soldiers. The decision was harsh. Families wanted sons and brothers returned. Hannibal offered terms. The Senate's refusal declared that surrender would not be made safe, and that Rome would not allow the prisoners to become proof of its weakness. Rome recruited younger men and older men. It armed those not normally called into service. In the emergency, even enslaved men were offered freedom in exchange for fighting. Gold and silver were gathered. Religious ceremonies tried to calm fear and restore favor with the gods. The city grieved, but the machinery of the Republic continued. Magistrates still held office. The Senate still met. Allies were still asked for troops. Roads still carried orders. New legions began to form around the absence of the old ones. The first reports from Cannae did not arrive as a complete account. They came as fragments carried by fugitives, messengers, and rumor. A consul was dead. The army was surrounded. Thousands were missing. Men who had escaped could describe only the part of the field they had seen before running. In Rome, families waited for names. The scale of the loss could not be understood at once. Each new survivor reduced one household's fear and confirmed another household's grief. Streets filled with questions. Temples filled with people asking the gods why sacrifice and courage had not protected the Republic. The Senate tried to prevent panic from becoming flight. Guards watched the gates. Public mourning was restricted for a time because grief visible everywhere could make the city appear already defeated. The surviving consul Vero returned, and despite the disaster, Rome thanked him for not despairing of the Republic. That gesture mattered. Rome did not pretend the battle had been well commanded. It declared that survival after failure still had value. A commander who returned would not be driven into exile merely because Hannibal had defeated him. The state needed every experienced man it still possessed. The survivors of Cannae were treated with severity. Some were sent to Sicily and denied the ordinary honor of returning until they had earned it through further service. Rome converted shame into manpower. The Senate also faced Hannibal's prisoners. An embassy of captives or their representatives came seeking permission for ransom. The argument was human and persuasive. The men had fought, they had families, and private money could bring them home without burdening the state. Rome refused. The decision was cruel to the captured and to those who loved them. It also sent a message to every future Roman line. The Republic would not make surrender an expected road back to safety. Hannibal understood the emotional pressure the prisoners created. Their absence entered Roman houses. Their continued captivity proved his power. But the Senate chose to let that pain harden rather than soften its policy. Emergency measures followed. Slaves volunteered or were purchased for military service and promised freedom. Debtors and men outside the usual categories of levy were armed. Weapons were taken from temples and public stores. Allies were ordered to provide new contingents even when their previous contingents lay dead at Cannae. No single measure replaced the lost army. Together, they showed the character of the system Hannibal was trying to break. Rome did not possess a secret reserve untouched by disaster. It created a reserve by changing rules under pressure. That ability was invisible on the battlefield. Hannibal could count the dead before him. He could not count the decisions being made behind the walls. This was the answer Hannibal had not expected in full. He understood Roman pride, aggression, and the habits of individual commanders with extraordinary clarity. He had not fully measured the ability of the Roman system to refuse the meaning of defeat. Cannae had destroyed an army. Rome would not allow it to destroy confidence. For Hannibal, this created a cruel problem. Another victory equal to Cannae was almost impossible to reproduce. Rome would no longer place its entire strength in front of him under conditions he could shape. Commanders returned to versions of Fabian caution. They shadowed, harassed, recovered towns, attacked detachments, and avoided the great decisive battle Hannibal wanted. He had reached the summit of tactical success. The road beyond it was less clear. In Carthage, news of Cannae arrived with objects as well as words. Hannibal sent his brother Mago across the sea to report the victories and ask for greater support. Ancient tradition says Mago poured a mass of gold rings onto the floor before the Carthaginian council, rings taken from Roman equestrians and men of rank who had died in battle. The image was designed to make distance disappear. Carthaginian politicians had not stood on the field. They had not watched the Roman line close around itself or seen senators among the dead. The rings made victory visible and countable. Each one had belonged to a man whose wealth and status were recognized by Rome. Together, they seemed to prove that the Republic's ruling class had been cut open. Mago asked for men, money, grain, and elephants. The request created a moment when Carthage might have concentrated more heavily on Italy. Support was approved, but war in Spain and other theaters altered where forces were ultimately needed. Ancient accounts, especially those shaped by later debate, make it easy to imagine one hostile faction deliberately denying Hannibal everything. The truth was more complicated and perhaps more tragic. Carthage had resources, but not control of the entire road between its resources and Hannibal. Roman fleets watched the sea. Spain demanded armies. Sardinia and Sicily offered opportunities that might change the wider war. North Africa could not be left defenseless. Every reinforcement sent toward one theater weakened another. The politicians also faced a question Hannibal's battlefield success could not answer for them. Was Rome truly about to collapse? If so, one final concentration in Italy might end the war. If not, pouring everything into an army separated by sea and mountains could expose Carthage elsewhere. Hannibal had crossed the Alps partly to escape Roman naval power. After Cannae, that same distance made victory difficult to support. Diplomacy seemed capable of supplying what ships could not. Philip V of Macedon saw Roman weakness and agreed to an alliance with Hannibal. A Macedonian attack across the Adriatic might force Rome to divide attention and encourage further defections. But the treaty itself revealed the fragility of communication. The envoys carrying it were intercepted by Roman forces. Rome learned of the danger, and prepared to contain Macedon before Philip could transform the Italian war. The Macedonian alliance created pressure, but not the great eastern invasion Hannibal needed. Rome found Greek allies of its own and kept Philip occupied across the Adriatic. Once again, the Republic refused to face one threat alone. It turned local rivalries into another barrier around Hannibal's strategy. In southern Italy, cities made decisions through internal struggle rather than one shared voice. Aristocrats, common citizens, pro-Roman factions, anti-Roman factions, debtors, landowners, and neighboring rivals did not always agree on which power offered safety. A city might send secret messengers to Hannibal while its gates remained guarded by Roman supporters. A few men could promise betrayal and discover they controlled less than they claimed. Hostages might tie families to Rome. Local enemies might choose opposite sides simply because cooperation was impossible. Hannibal could offer freedom from Roman rule. Rome could offer the memory of what happened when Rome returned. Neither promise was abstract. Men deciding inside city walls imagined confiscated land, executed leaders, rewarded allies, unpaid debts, old rivalries, and which army would still be nearby next year. Capua's defection appeared to confirm Hannibal's plan, but it also exposed the burden hidden in success. The city expected a favorable relationship, not occupation without limit. Its leaders had ambitions of their own. They did not leave Rome simply to become passive servants of Carthage. Hannibal had to hold together a coalition in which every ally joined for a different future. The Gauls wanted relief from Roman expansion. Capua wanted power and independence. Macedon wanted advantage across the Adriatic. Carthage wanted victory without destroying itself in the effort. Hannibal wanted all those desires to move in one direction long enough to break Rome. Rome needed only to keep them from arriving together. After Cannae, the war no longer depended on whether Hannibal could create another battlefield masterpiece. It depended on whether 100 separate calculations would align before Roman recovery made them dangerous. Capua welcomed him with wealth, political importance, and a base in southern Italy. Roman moral tradition later claimed that the comforts of the city softened his soldiers. The story suited Roman ideas about discipline and luxury, but Hannibal's army remained dangerous for years. The deeper problem was not that his men became weak in comfortable houses. The problem was that one defecting city needed protection from the entire Roman system. Capua expected Hannibal to defend it. Other allies expected the same. Each new alliance increased his political reach, but also gave Rome another target he might be forced to save. An army that lived in movement now had commitments. At Nola, a city whose internal factions were divided, Hannibal tried to gain entry. Marcus Claudius Marcellus held the city for Rome. In a series of encounters, Marcellus prevented its capture and showed Roman soldiers that meeting Hannibal did not always end in annihilation. Nola was not Cannae in reverse. It did not destroy Hannibal's army or change the war in a day. Its value was psychological and practical. The gates remained closed. A Roman commander stood his ground. The myth that Hannibal could not be resisted began to weaken. Marcellus and Fabius came to symbolize two different forms of the Roman response. Fabius delayed, denied, and wore down. Marcellus was more willing to strike when conditions offered an advantage. Neither man solved the war alone. Together, they represented a republic learning not to fight according to one fixed idea of courage. Hannibal still won battles and captured towns. He moved across southern Italy, threatened Roman positions, supported allies, and remained too dangerous for any careless commander. But Rome no longer needed to defeat him everywhere. It needed to keep enough cities loyal and recover enough defectors that his political victory never became complete. The war spread. In Sicily, Syracuse changed sides after the death of King Hiero II, Rome's long-standing ally. The city resisted Roman siege with defenses associated with the mathematician Archimedes. Machines lifted or damaged ships. Missiles reached unexpected distances. Roman soldiers learned to fear the walls. But Syracuse eventually fell. In Spain, the elder Scipios continued the war against the Carthaginian base. Rome understood that Hannibal's army in Italy had roots. Silver, troops, commanders, and family power came from Iberia. Cut those roots, and every year Hannibal remained in Italy would become harder. The war also reached Macedon, Sardinia, and the sea. Carthage was not simply refusing to support Hannibal while keeping all its strength at home. It was fighting across several theaters, responding to Roman pressure wherever it appeared. Still, the Italian campaign needed reinforcement. Hannibal could replace some losses with Gauls and Italian allies, but the veteran corps that had crossed from Spain could not be recreated easily. Horses died. Experienced officers fell. Allied loyalty shifted with fortune. Every year consumed the army that had made Trebia, Trasimene, and Cannae possible. An army must eat even when history remembers no battle. Grain had to be gathered, carried, ground, and cooked. Horses needed fodder and water. Weapons broke. Sandals wore through. Leather rotted. Wounds became infected. Men fell sick in marshes and winter camps. An allied city that fed Hannibal also emptied its stores and invited Roman punishment. The longer he stayed, the more difficult it became to appear as a liberator rather than another power living from Italian land. Rome understood this pressure. It punished defection and rewarded continued loyalty. Its message to the allied cities became simple: Hannibal may win today, but Rome will return. Choose him, and when Rome returns, your walls, land, leaders, and families will pay. Fear worked in both directions. Capua became the clearest test. Rome placed the city under siege. Hannibal tried to relieve it, but the Romans maintained pressure. He attacked their camps and searched for an opening. When he could not break the siege directly, he chose a move designed to force them away. He marched toward Rome. The old nightmare became visible. Hannibal was no longer a distant name attached to reports from the south. His army approached the city itself and camped near the Anio River. Inside Rome, fear spread. Citizens could see smoke and movement beyond the walls. The phrase Hannibal at the gates entered memory because for a moment the enemy who had destroyed armies seemed close enough to touch the center of Roman life. Yet the city did not collapse. Troops remained available for defense. The walls stood. Most importantly, the armies besieging Capua did not abandon their task. Hannibal had threatened the heart in order to save an ally. Rome refused to choose. He could not remain before the city without siege equipment and supplies. He withdrew. Capua fell in 211 BCE. Rome punished it severely. Leading men were executed. Land and political rights were taken. The city survived, but the lesson traveled across Italy. Hannibal could win your allegiance. He might not be able to save you from Rome's return. The political weapon he had designed before crossing the Alps was beginning to turn against him. Tarentum offered another opportunity. It was one of the most important Greek cities in southern Italy, with a valuable harbor. Through contacts inside, Hannibal entered much of the city in 212 BCE, though the Roman garrison held the citadel and retained access to the sea. The incomplete victory revealed the continuing problem. Hannibal controlled the city, but not the entire strategic position. Rome supplied the citadel by water. Years later, Fabius recovered Tarentum for Rome through betrayal from within. Every gate opened by a secret faction could one day be opened again. The war was becoming a contest not of one brilliant plan, but of endurance across cities, coasts, roads, and years. In Spain, Roman fortunes collapsed in 211 BCE when Publius and Gnaeus Scipio were defeated and killed. For Carthage, this should have relieved pressure on the western base. For Rome, It was another catastrophe that might have ended effort in a less determined state. Rome sent another Scipio. Publius Cornelius Scipio was still young and had not yet held the highest offices normally expected for such command. He carried the memory of Ticinus, where his father had been wounded, and the deaths of his father and uncle in Spain. He also carried something Rome had slowly learned from Hannibal. War could be won through surprise, alliance, speed, and psychological effect, not only through heavier infantry and stubborn advance. In 209 BCE, Scipio struck New Carthage. The city appeared secure. It stood on a peninsula protected by water and walls, with a lagoon on one side. Scipio learned that the lagoon became shallow at a particular time and prepared an assault from a direction the defenders did not expect. While Roman forces attacked the main defenses, another group crossed through the shallow water and reached less protected walls. New Carthage fell in a single daring operation. The loss was enormous for the Carthaginian position. The city contained weapons, money, ships, hostages from Spanish communities, and the symbolic center of Barcid power. Scipio treated many hostages with calculated generosity, sending them home and offering local leaders a reason to change sides. He was not merely taking a fortress, he was taking confidence. The Roman who would eventually defeat Hannibal was learning to fight a political war as well as a military one. The fall of New Carthage was only the beginning of Scipio's answer in Spain. He had taken the enemy's great base, but Carthaginian armies remained in the peninsula under Hannibal Barca, Mago, and Hasdrubal's son of Gisco. They were divided by distance and sometimes by strategy. Scipio had to prevent them from combining, while also convincing Spanish communities that Rome would be a safer partner than the power established by the Barcids. He used generosity carefully. One story tells of a young woman of exceptional beauty captured after New Carthage. Her family offered ransom, but Scipio returned her to the man she was to marry and allowed the money to become a gift. The scene may have been refined by later writers into an example of Roman self-control, yet it reflects Scipio's political method. He wanted local leaders to repeat stories in which Roman victory did not automatically mean humiliation. Hannibal had released Italian allies after his battles for the same reason. Scipio was learning to make mercy serve strategy. At Becula in 208 BCE, he defeated Hasdrubal Barca but did not trap and destroy the entire army. Hasdrubal withdrew with part of his force and began the march that would eventually carry him over the Alps toward Italy. Critics could say Scipio had allowed Hannibal's brother to escape. Scipio judged that chasing him north might pull the Roman army away from the greater task of defeating the remaining Carthaginian power in Spain. The decision showed a commander choosing the war over the immediate glory of pursuit. Hasdrubal's departure also created a strange race across distance. He was moving toward the brother who needed him, while Scipio remained behind dismantling the world that had made both brothers powerful. The decisive Spanish battle came at Ilipa in 206 BCE. For several days, Scipio formed his army in one arrangement, placing Roman legionaries in the center and Spanish allies on the wings. The Carthaginian commanders answered in a corresponding pattern, with their strongest African infantry in the center. Routine became expectation. On the day of battle, Scipio changed everything. He brought his men out earlier than usual, forcing the Carthaginians to deploy before many had eaten. He placed the Roman legions on the wings and the Spanish allies in the center. Then he advanced the wings more quickly, striking the weaker parts of the Carthaginian line while the strong African center remained delayed and unable to help. The method carried an echo of Hannibal. Use repetition to teach the enemy what to expect. Then break the pattern on the day expectation matters. The Carthaginian army was defeated. Its position in Spain collapsed soon after. Mago left for the Balearic Islands and later attempted another landing in northern Italy, but the age of Barcid Spain was ending. Scipio had not merely won territory. He had shown that Rome now possessed a commander willing to manipulate time, formation, hunger, and expectation with the same kind of imagination that had once belonged almost entirely to Hannibal. The contest between the two men was developing before they ever met. Hannibal taught through the wounds he inflicted. Scipio learned through the survival of his state. Hannibal remained in Italy, still hoping that forces from Spain could reach him. His brother Hasdrubal attempted what Rome had feared from the beginning. He moved north, crossed the Alps, and entered Italy in 207 BCE. The crossing appears to have been faster and less destructive than Hannibal's, perhaps because the route was better known and Gallic support stronger. Hasdrubal gathered men in northern Italy and moved south, intending to unite with his brother. If the two armies joined, Rome might face a renewed crisis. Hannibal's veterans and experience combined with a fresh army from the north could force the Republic into the kind of large battle it had tried to avoid. Messages passed between the brothers. One fell into Roman hands. The consul Gaius Claudius Nero was watching Hannibal in the south. When he learned of Hasdrubal's movement, he made a dangerous decision. He left part of his force facing Hannibal, selected troops, and marched north with extraordinary speed to join the Roman army opposing Hasdrubal. Hannibal did not immediately realize that many of the men before him had disappeared. At the Metaurus River, Hasdrubal found himself facing a stronger Roman force than expected. He understood that another consular army had arrived. The battle was fierce. Hasdrubal tried to use difficult ground to protect part of his line, but Roman pressure eventually broke through. Surrounded and recognizing defeat, he rode into the fighting and died. His army was destroyed. Nero marched south again before Hannibal could exploit his absence. The first certain news Hannibal received came in a form chosen to wound as deeply as possible. The Romans threw Hasdrubal's severed head into his camp. The brother who had crossed the Alps to save the campaign arrived only as a body made into a message. Ancient tradition says Hannibal looked upon the head and understood the fate of Carthage. Whether he spoke the words later attributed to him, the strategic truth was clear. The chance to unite the armies had vanished. Spain was slipping away. The Italian allies were being recovered. The campaign that had once threatened to break Rome had become an effort to survive in the far south. Still, Hannibal did not collapse. He withdrew into Bruttium, modern Calabria, and held his army together for years. Rome did not easily destroy him. Even after hope of final victory had narrowed, he remained a commander too dangerous to attack without care. This long resistance deserves as much admiration as the famous battles. A general can inspire men on the morning of victory. Hannibal kept a multinational army together after reinforcements failed, allies fell, brothers died, and the original strategy had lost its path. Men remained because of habit, loyalty, fear, pay, shared survival, and the authority of a commander who had carried them through a world that seemed impossible. In Bruttium, the war became quieter without becoming easy. Hannibal's territory narrowed toward the toe of Italy. The landscape offered mountains, coastal routes, allied strongholds, and ports through which contact with Carthage might still be maintained. It also placed him farther from the Italian communities whose defection had once promised to break Rome. Croton became one of his important bases. Nearby stood the sanctuary of Hera at the Licinian promontory, looking over the sea. Ancient tradition says Hannibal left an inscription there recording his campaigns and forces in Greek and Punic. Polybius later used or referred to such a record. The image is striking. After years of movement, Hannibal set part of his story into a sacred place above the water, as if preserving an account while the outcome was still uncertain. Around him, the army waded through seasons that offered no path back to Cannae. Roman forces contained rather than rushed him. Towns that remained loyal to Carthage faced siege, betrayal, hunger, or isolation. Messengers crossing the sea carried news that arrived late and was often already bad. Spain lost, allies weakening, Roman armies preparing in Africa. Hannibal still watched for opportunity. He could punish careless detachments and move quickly enough to prevent Rome from treating him as harmless. But the great political aim had faded from immediate reach. The soldiers who remained with him were no longer simply an invading army. They had become a community formed by war. Some had taken local wives or built relationships in Italian towns. Some had joined only after the crossing. Some were children or younger men when the campaign began and were now veterans with scars and authority. The army carried several versions of the past within it. Those who remembered the Alps could compare the cold passes with the warm coast of Bruttium and wonder how the road had become so long. Those who joined after Cannae had entered a victorious cause and watched it contract around them. Officers had to maintain drills, guard discipline, gather food, and preserve the belief that Carthage had not forgotten them. Pay and reward still mattered. So did the reputation of Hannibal himself. He remained the reason many men believed the army could survive another year. When the recall finally came, not everyone welcomed it. Ancient accounts portray Hannibal grieving or raging that Carthage had defeated him by calling him home when Rome could not defeat him in Italy. The words may reflect literary drama, but the bitterness is believable. He had spent nearly his entire mature command in the peninsula, leaving meant admitting that the strategy had ended without the result for which so many had died. He also had to decide who could leave. Ships could not carry every person attached to 15 years of campaigning. Allies and deserters feared Roman punishment. Ancient tradition includes harsh stories of men killed when they refused to follow or could not be taken, though details are difficult to judge through hostile sources. A long war rarely ends cleanly for those who built lives inside it. The army gathered at the coast. Weapons, animals, baggage, records, veterans, officers, servants, families, and memories had to be sorted for departure. Fires may have destroyed what could not be carried. Ships waited on water that led back toward Carthage. Hannibal looked across the sea toward the city whose war had shaped every stage of his life. He had crossed into Italy through the highest road. He left it by ship, called home by an enemy who had finally learned to strike where he could not refuse to answer. But the decision was moving away from Italy. Scipio completed the Roman conquest of Carthaginian Spain. He defeated armies, won local allies, and removed the foundation from which the Barcid family had built its challenge. Then he proposed a plan that many Romans considered dangerous: invade Africa. Some senators, including Fabius, feared leaving Hannibal in Italy while sending a major army overseas. Scipio argued that attacking Carthage would force Hannibal to leave. The strategy mirrored Hannibal's own insight. Do not fight only where the enemy's army stands. Strike where the enemy's political survival demands an answer. Scipio landed in North Africa in 204 BCE. There he gained the alliance of Massinissa, a Numidian prince whose rivalry with Syphax was tied to the wider war. Numidian cavalry had been among Hannibal's greatest weapons in Italy. Now the balance of alliance shifted. The horsemen whose style Rome had once struggled to answer would ride with Scipio. Carthaginian and Numidian forces suffered severe defeats. In a devastating night attack, Roman troops set fire to enemy camps built from flammable materials and attacked amid confusion. Scipio had learned the value of surprise and terror. Carthage opened negotiations. Then it recalled Hannibal. After roughly 15 years in Italy, the commander received the order that ended the campaign. He had entered as a young man with a plan that nearly changed history. He left as the only commander Rome had never decisively defeated in a major pitched battle on Italian soil, yet also as the man whose purpose there had failed. The departure must have carried a grief no triumphal account could fully hold. Italy was enemy country. but it had also become the landscape of Hannibal's adult life. His soldiers had crossed rivers, mountains, battlefields, and years there. They had buried comrades beside roads, in winter camps, near unnamed villages, and on fields remembered only by those who survived. Now they boarded ships for Africa. They were not returning as conquerors. They were returning because Carthage itself was in danger. The war had come home. Hannibal returned to a city that knew his name better than it knew the man. He had left Carthaginian territory as a commander in his 20s. He came back in his 40s, marked by weather, illness, battle, and the loss of an eye. A generation had grown up while he fought in Italy. Political rivals had aged. Children had become soldiers. The city he had tried to protect from Rome now faced Roman camps on African soil. Carthage still possessed wealth, walls, and the ability to raise men, but the balance had changed. Spain was gone. Numidian politics favored Scipio. Roman armies had learned to maneuver with greater flexibility. The confidence created by Hannibal's early victories belonged to another stage of the war. Yet his return revived hope. The general who had destroyed Roman armies was home. Veterans from Italy stood with him. Carthage gathered new troops, elephants, and whatever strength remained. If Hannibal could defeat Scipio, the negotiations might be rewritten and the city might recover room to breathe. The two armies moved across the interior of North Africa. Before the final battle, ancient writers describe a meeting between Hannibal and Scipio. We cannot know the exact words. Livy shaped the encounter into a dramatic conversation between two great commanders, while Polybius presents the negotiations with his own purpose and distance. But a meeting is plausible, and the image has endured because the men had come to represent the whole arc of the war. Hannibal was the invader who had crossed the Alps and taught Rome fear. Scipio was the Roman who had watched, learned, and carried the war back to Carthage. Hannibal is said to have offered peace. He understood the danger. Scipio demanded terms Carthage would not accept before battle. Words ended. The armies prepared near Zama in 202 BCE, though the exact location remains uncertain. Hannibal arranged his force in several lines. At the front stood elephants, perhaps around 80 according to ancient accounts, though numbers are uncertain. Behind them were infantry of different experience, mercenaries and allied troops, Carthaginian and African levies, and farther back the veterans who had returned from Italy. Those veterans were the hardest part of his army. They knew Hannibal's methods. They had seen Roman legions break. They carried years of shared discipline and memory. But the army as a whole did not possess the unity of Cannae. Some men had never fought beside one another. Some were newly raised. The lines were not simply layers of one instrument, but forces with different confidence and history. Scipio arranged the Roman infantry with lanes running through the formation. Normally, Roman maniples stood in a checkerboard pattern with gaps that could be closed or opened. At Zama, Scipio aligned those spaces so that charging elephants might be channeled through rather than allowed to crash into a solid wall. Light troops waited in the lanes. Trumpets and horns were ready to create noise. On the Roman wings stood cavalry. Massinissa commanded Numidian horsemen on one side. Gaius Laelius commanded Roman and allied cavalry on the other. This was the advantage Hannibal had once held. Now Scipio possessed it. The battle began with the elephants. The animals moved forward under shouting handlers. Dust rose. Their size, sound, and smell could terrify horses and shake infantry before contact. Against an unprepared line, an elephant charge might tear order apart. Scipio's men made noise. Trumpets sounded. Soldiers shouted and struck shields. Some elephants panicked before reaching the line. Others veered toward the wings, where skirmishers attacked them. Several turned back into Carthaginian cavalry, contributing to disorder. Those that continued found the Roman lanes opening. Light troops moved aside, attacked from the flanks, and allowed many animals to pass through the formation. Instead of becoming a wall for the elephants to break, the Roman army became a set of channels. Hannibal's first great shock failed to produce collapse. Then the cavalry fought. Massinissa and Laelius drove the Carthaginian and allied horsemen from the field and pursued them away. For the moment, the Roman cavalry also disappeared from the main battle. The infantry met. Hannibal's first line fought fiercely, but coordination between the lines broke down. When the front troops began to retreat, the men behind did not simply open and absorb them. Fighting and confusion developed between Carthaginian formations. The defeated first line tried to escape around the flanks. The second line then faced the Romans and was also driven back. Bodies and abandoned weapons covered the space between the armies. Scipio paused and reformed his men for the final contest. Ahead stood Hannibal's veterans from Italy. These were not frightened recruits. They had survived the Alps, the marshes, Trebia, Trasimene, Cannae, and the long, narrowing years in southern Italy. They understood what defeat would mean. The final lines collided. For a time, the struggle remained uncertain. Roman infantry had fought through two earlier lines and was tired. Hannibal's veterans held. The two armies pressed against one another in a battle without the elegant shape of Cannae. Then sound came from behind the Carthaginian line. The cavalry had returned. Massinissa and Laelius had driven the opposing horsemen away and now came back to the field. They struck Hannibal's veterans from the rear. The image was bitterly familiar. At Cannae, cavalry had returned behind the Roman infantry and completed Hannibal's encirclement. At Zama, the same final movement closed against him. The veterans fought, but the battle was lost. Many were killed. Hannibal escaped with a small group. For the first time in the war, he had suffered the decisive defeat that Rome needed. It did not erase Trebia, Trasimene, or Cannae. It did not make Scipio a greater tactician in every measure. It settled the question that mattered now. Carthage could not continue. Hannibal advised peace. He had spent his life resisting Rome, but he understood that another army could not be created in time and that refusing terms might bring destruction upon the city. There was courage in the decision. A commander who knows when a war is lost protects what remains rather than feeding pride with the lives of others. The peace terms ended Carthage as an equal great power. It surrendered most of its warships, keeping only 10. It gave up its war elephants and overseas possessions. It accepted a heavy indemnity. It could not wage war outside Africa and could not fight even within Africa without Roman permission. Carthage survived, but its freedom of action did not. Scipio returned to Rome and received the name Africanus. The city celebrated the end of a war that had occupied nearly a generation. The general who had learned from Hannibal now stood as the man who had defeated him. For Rome, Zama became proof that endurance had been rewarded. For Hannibal, it was the closing of the future he had tried to create. He had not failed because he lacked courage. He had not failed because the crossing of the Alps was meaningless or because Cannae had been an illusion. His plan had identified Rome's alliance system as the heart of Roman power, and large parts of southern Italy had indeed defected. But not enough. Not quickly enough. The Roman center held while the edges trembled. Rome replaced armies, denied surrender, recovered cities, attacked Spain, learned from defeat, found Scipio, gained Massinissa, and turned time into a weapon. Hannibal could shape battlefields with astonishing precision. He could not force the Roman Republic to understand its losses as final. That was the one thing his strategy required. After Zama, another kind of life began. Hannibal did not disappear into private retirement. Carthage had lost an empire, most of its fleet, its elephants, and the freedom to make war. It also owed Rome an indemnity so large that payment would shape public life for decades. The city remained rich enough to recover, but every recovery took place beneath Roman observation. A missed payment could become an accusation. A quarrel with a neighboring kingdom could become a Roman decision. Victory had not destroyed Carthage, but it had placed the city inside a cage whose bars were treaties, debt, and fear. Hannibal returned from the battlefield knowing that a defeated city could be ruined as easily by corruption as by an enemy army. Years passed before he entered the highest level of public office, but he did not become harmless while waiting. Veterans remembered the commander who had shared their marches. Ordinary citizens knew that he had spent much of his life fighting the state, now collecting money from them. Wealthy families and political rivals saw something more dangerous: a defeated general whose reputation had survived defeat. When Hannibal was elected Suffete, one of Carthage's senior magistrates, he entered a different battlefield. There were no cavalry wings to send around a flank. No mist concealed an ambush. No trumpet could make accounts balance. The resistance came through contracts, courts, family influence, and men who had learned to treat public money as private property. Carthage's indemnity had to be paid from taxes, customs, trade, estates, and the revenues of a city still connected to Mediterranean commerce. Yet money that should have reached the treasury passed through hands accustomed to keeping part of it. Officials protected one another. Judges belonged to circles of influence. Contractors knew which families could silence an inquiry. Hannibal attacked the system with the same instinct he had used against Rome: find the hidden structure supporting the visible strength. He examined revenues. He challenged officials. He tried to limit the power of men who could hold judicial authority for life and use it to protect their own class. Later accounts describe reforms that made office more accountable and prevented the same small group from controlling public judgment indefinitely. The exact legal details are difficult to reconstruct, but the political effect is clear. People who had profited from the old arrangement began to fear him. Hannibal then produced a result that must have been especially satisfying. Carthage continued paying Rome without imposing the crushing new burdens that corrupt officials had claimed were necessary. Money existed. It had simply not all been reaching the state. The man who had once tried to defeat Rome with cavalry and infantry was now paying Rome more efficiently by defeating theft at home. Citizens admired him for it. His enemies understood the danger immediately. A general can be isolated by defeat. A reformer who gives people proof that powerful men have been stealing from them is harder to isolate. Hannibal's popularity connected military memory with present anger. He had not merely returned from the lost war. He had shown that Carthage could still act with discipline if those benefiting from weakness were removed. His opponents could not easily attack him only inside Carthage, so they turned toward Rome. They accused Hannibal of preparing another war. They claimed he was exchanging messages with Antiochus III, the powerful Seleucid king whose realm stretched across much of the eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia. Rome was already watching Antiochus with suspicion. A report that Hannibal might join him was exactly the kind of rumor Roman senators were prepared to believe. Rome had defeated Carthage. It had defeated Hannibal at Zama. Yet the possibility that his mind might find another army was enough to disturb the victors. Roman envoys arrived in 195 BCE. Their presence changed the air in the city before any formal demand was spoken. Carthage knew what Roman embassies could mean. Hannibal knew that political enemies at home had invited foreign power into a domestic struggle. If he waited for legal certainty, he might discover that certainty took the form of guards outside his door. He left before Rome could possess him. Ancient accounts describe preparations made quietly. A man who had spent his life thinking about roads would not trust only one. He left Carthage under cover of ordinary movement, traveled to the coast, and found a ship. Behind him stood the harbor of the city for which he had crossed mountains and fought half a lifetime. He had returned from Italy because Carthage called him home. Now Carthage could not protect him from Rome. The departure was not the dramatic escape of a young commander breaking through an Alpine pass. It was quieter and perhaps more painful. No army followed. No elephants moved in the dark. He carried experience, reputation, and whatever private grief belongs to a man leaving his city without knowing whether he will ever see it again. The ship carried him east. He passed through the older Phoenician world from which Carthage's founders had once sailed west. At Tyre, the ancestral mother city of Carthage, he was received with honor. The welcome could not change the fact that he was now in exile. Every harbor offered shelter only until politics changed. From there, he moved toward the court of Antiochus III. Antiochus ruled an enormous kingdom. On maps, his resources seemed greater than anything Hannibal had commanded. He had cities, armies, cavalry, elephants, money, and claims stretching across regions Rome had only recently begun to enter. To men who feared Roman expansion, he looked like the power capable of stopping it. Hannibal knew that size alone would not be enough. He had seen Roman armies destroyed and replaced. He had watched the Republic lose more men than most states could imagine raising, then return with new legions. He understood that Rome grew stronger when enemies waited, divided their forces, or allowed Roman diplomacy to separate allies one by one. His advice followed the logic of his own life. Do not wait for Rome to choose the field. Strike toward Italy. Force Roman allies to calculate again. Build fleets and alliances before Roman pressure closes every route. Use Carthage, Macedon, and the Greek world as parts of one larger contest rather than fighting separate wars after Rome has prepared for each. It was a strategy born from knowledge purchased at terrible cost. But Hannibal was no longer the commander who could turn advice into movement. At Antiochus's court, he was one voice among generals, courtiers, relatives, diplomats, and men suspicious of the fame of a foreign exile. Some admired him. Others feared that giving him an army would make him too powerful. Still others believed the Roman threat could be managed through negotiation or limited war. Kings often welcome famous advisors more easily than they obey them. Later tradition placed another remarkable meeting during these Eastern years. Scipio, traveling as part of a Roman embassy, is said to have encountered Hannibal at Ephesus. The two men who had ended the Great War on opposite sides were no longer facing one another across a battlefield. They stood in a court where both were visitors and where reputation could speak more freely than armies. Scipio supposedly asked Hannibal whom he considered the greatest general in history. Hannibal named Alexander first, Pyrrhus second, and himself third. Scipio then asked where Hannibal would have placed himself if he had defeated Scipio at Zama. First, Hannibal replied, "The exchange may have been polished by later writers. It is almost too elegant, and ancient anecdotes often become sharper as they travel. Yet the story survived because it captured the pride of both men without turning either into a fool." Hannibal could acknowledge defeat while preserving the scale of what he believed he had nearly achieved. Scipio could hear that his own victory was the reason Hannibal ranked himself only third. For a moment, the old enemies appear without armies around them. No cavalry returns. No elephants charge. The contest is reduced to memory and words. Rome has won the war, but Hannibal still refuses to let defeat define the whole measure of his life. Antiochus moved into conflict with Rome, but not with the concentration and speed Hannibal believed necessary. Opportunities narrowed. Greek allies proved uncertain. Roman diplomacy worked. Roman armies crossed the sea. Hannibal, whose greatest victories had come on land, was eventually given a naval command. Off the coast of Asia Minor, his fleet met experienced Rhodian ships allied with Rome. The sea did not offer the same freedom as the fields of Italy. Ships could not bend backward like the center at Cannae. Crews needed training together. Maneuver depended on wind, oars, formation, and sailors whose habits could not be transformed by one speech. His fleet was defeated. The loss was not a second Zama, but it revealed how far his position had changed. The man whose name had once terrified consuls was being used at the edge of another ruler's strategy, in a form of warfare that was not his greatest strength. Rome defeated Antiochus decisively. The peace terms demanded money, territory, hostages, ships, and the surrender of enemies who had taken refuge at the Seleucid court. Hannibal's name was among them. Again, he left before hands closed around him. The following years are difficult to trace with certainty. Ancient traditions place him in several courts and connect him with rulers from Armenia to Crete. Some stories may have grown because any clever plan in the Eastern Mediterranean could later be attached to the most famous strategist alive. Yet the pattern is believable even when details blur. Hannibal moved because Rome's influence moved. A king might welcome him today and decide tomorrow that friendship with Rome was worth more than loyalty to an exile. A city might admire him but lack the strength to refuse a Roman demand. Each refuge was a temporary camp, and the world around him was becoming increasingly Roman. Eventually, he found protection in Bithynia, a smaller kingdom in northwestern Asia Minor ruled by Prussia's eye. There, even in old age, Hannibal's instinct for surprise had not disappeared. Prussia's was at war with Eumenes II of Pergamum, a ruler favored by Rome. During a naval battle, Hannibal is said to have ordered clay vessels filled with snakes and thrown onto enemy ships. At first, the containers may have looked harmless or merely strange. When they shattered, panic spread across the decks. Sailors who could face arrows and blades recoiled from creatures moving unpredictably at their feet. The story may have been embellished, but it survived because it captured something true about the remembered Hannibal. He attacked certainty. He wanted the enemy to discover that the object dismissed a moment earlier had changed the entire situation. The scale was smaller than Cannae. The principle was the same. But cleverness could not reverse the direction of the Mediterranean. Rome's allies grew stronger. Rome's enemies became more cautious. Prussians could enjoy Hannibal's advice only while the cost remained low. Then Roman envoys came to Bithynia. Hannibal was an old man. Carthage had been defeated for years. Antiochus had made peace. No great army waited for him. Yet Rome still wanted the possibility represented by his survival removed. The demand placed Prussians in a simple position: protect Hannibal and risk Roman hostility, or surrender a guest whose usefulness had become dangerous. Guards surrounded the place where Hannibal was staying. Ancient tradition says the house had several exits because he had long expected betrayal. He checked them and discovered that each was watched. For most of his life, an unexpected road had existed. Across Spain, over the Rhone, through the Alps, out of the Falernian trap behind cattle carrying fire, away from Carthage before the Roman envoys could seize him, away from Antiochus before the treaty closed. Now every road ended at the walls of one house. Hannibal had carried poison for this moment. Ancient writers give different versions of his final words. In one, he mocked the Romans for being unable to rest while an old man remained alive. The exact sentence cannot be recovered. The choice itself is clear. Rome would not lead him in chains. He drank the poison and died, probably in 183 BCE, though ancient dates differ slightly. He was far from Carthage. No cavalry waited beyond the walls. No brother was marching toward him. No soldiers looked to his face for the signal that would turn retreat into a trap. The boy who had once sworn never to be a friend of Rome had reached the end of every road Rome had left open. Even then, he denied Rome the final spectacle. His death did not end Roman fear of Carthage. The city continued to recover economically, and recovery itself became suspicious. Massinissa, Rome's Numidian ally, repeatedly took Carthaginian territory. Carthage appealed to Rome, but Rome judged the disputes while benefiting from Carthage's weakness. The peace imposed after Zama prevented the city from defending itself freely. Decades after Hannibal's death, the pressure became impossible to contain. Roman politicians increasingly argued that Carthage must be destroyed. Cato the Elder became famous for repeating the demand, but the fear was larger than one man. Rome remembered what had happened when Carthage had still possessed Spain, armies, elephants, and a commander willing to cross the mountains. In 149 BCE, Roman demands pushed Carthage beyond submission. The city surrendered hostages and weapons, believing obedience might preserve peace. Then came the order that its people abandon the coast and rebuild inland, leaving the old city behind. For a maritime people, it was not relocation. It was erasure. Carthage resisted. Workshops made new weapons. Women are said to have cut their hair for bowstrings. Citizens who had surrendered arms now forged replacements behind walls they knew Rome intended to destroy. For 3 years, the city fought with the desperation of a place that no longer had a negotiated future. In 146 BCE, Roman forces broke through. Carthage burned. Many inhabitants were killed or enslaved. Streets that had carried merchants, priests, sailors, soldiers, children, and news from across the Mediterranean became ruins beneath Roman victory. Hannibal did not live to see it, but the destruction belonged partly to the memory of him. Rome had defeated Carthage at Zama, restricted it by treaty, and watched it for half a century. Still, the Republic did not feel entirely safe while the rival city remained. Hannibal had taught Rome how much danger could grow behind Carthaginian walls and across Spanish distances. Fear survived victory longer than Hannibal survived defeat. Later, Rome built a new city on the site. Carthage became important again, but as a Roman city. The harbor faced the same sea. The ground carried another language of power. The world Hannibal had fought to preserve was gone. What remained was the story Rome itself could not forget. Roman writers preserved the oath, the elephants, the mist, the cold river, the curved line at Cannae, the severed head of Hasdrubal, the meeting at Zama, and the poison in Bithynia. They wrote as citizens of the civilization Hannibal had failed to destroy, yet they could not make him small. Too many Roman families had once feared his name. Too many armies had disappeared inside his plans. Too many times the Republic had discovered that courage without judgment was exactly what he wanted from it. His greatest victory came at Cannae, but the meaning of his life was decided afterward. He waited for Rome to accept what the battlefield appeared to prove. Rome had lost its largest army. A consul was dead. Senators lay among the fallen. Allied cities had seen Roman protection fail. By the logic that had broken other states, peace should have followed. It did not. Rome did not deny the defeat. It denied Hannibal the right to decide what the defeat meant. That refusal changed the war. Hannibal could read a consul's impatience, shape a battlefield, conceal men in reeds, use mist, hunger, cavalry, and pride. He could keep a multinational army together for years in enemy country. He could make Rome bleed more deeply than any foreign commander before him. He could not make Rome stop being Rome. That was the one obstacle his victories could wound but not remove. The Republic raised another army, then another. It recovered cities. It fought in Spain while Hannibal remained in Italy. It learned from Fabius, Marcellus, and finally Scipio. It turned survival into strategy until time began to favor the side with deeper institutions rather than the side with the greater commander. Hannibal lost the war, but his failure was not small. A minor enemy does not force a civilization to transform itself. Hannibal did. Rome emerged from the Second Punic War grieving, indebted, hardened, and far more capable of carrying war beyond Italy. The republic that had nearly been broken soon moved with growing confidence into Spain, Greece, Macedon, Asia Minor, and North Africa. Hannibal had tried to prevent Roman expansion before it became impossible to contain. By forcing Rome to survive him, he helped create the Rome that would dominate the Mediterranean. That was not his intention. History rarely grants people control over the consequences of their greatest efforts. The Alps remained the clearest image of what he attempted. A young commander looked at a barrier Rome trusted and saw a road. He led men and elephants through snow, ambush, hunger, and fear because the ordinary routes favored his enemy. When the survivors descended into Italy, they carried a possibility no Roman plan had prepared to meet. For a time, that possibility seemed strong enough to become the future. The Trebia ran cold beneath Roman soldiers. Mist closed over Lake Trasimene. At Cannae, the Roman center advanced, and the world appeared to bend with Hannibal's line. Capua opened its gates. Rome waited for the next disaster. Then the Republic continued. Years passed. Hasdrubal never reached his brother. Capua fell. Spain was lost. Scipio crossed into Africa. The veterans who had survived Italy stood one final time at Zama and heard cavalry returning behind them. The road narrowed until it ended in a watched house far from Carthage. Yet the attempt remained large enough to haunt the victor. The night settles now over the old battlefields. The rivers continue toward the sea. Fields cover much of the ground where armies once stood. The ruins of Carthage face the dark water. Snow gathers over whichever Alpine pass carried the long column into Italy. Somewhere in memory, Rome is still looking north in disbelief. Hannibal is still descending from the mountains, not yet knowing how much he will win or what victory will fail to give him. He will destroy the armies. He will frighten the city. He will make another future visible. But Rome will not stop. Hannibal Barca came closer than any enemy before him to breaking the Roman Republic. He lost the war. He changed the world that survived him. Sleep well. Good night.